Hello, last we heard from China they deposed their old emperor and replaced him with his child, because that's what they do around there. But unlike most rebellions up until this point, this one is about to get very messy. Why? Well, look at the emperor's situation. He has no money, no army, no allies, his capital has been completely destroyed, and there is a thick barbarian army in the west looting towns and villages. So tell me, what exactly stops a vassal from declaring independence? Exactly nothing. So everyone and their mother declares independence, and the Zhou splits into a good 150 states. And immediately war breaks out between all of them. So now the new emperor's situation is quite bad. Nevertheless, with the help of some brand new allies, he and his family are able to travel to the east capital in Liuyang safely. Of the new 150 states, only a handful actually matter. So let's look at them. Firstly, we have Qin. The Qin was at the western edge of China, so it was constantly dealing with barbarian invasions, and as a result was unable to commit a lot of resources to conflicts within China. The state of Jin, who were currently dealing with a bit of a civil war. State of Chu, who you should be familiar with. They were currently dealing with some smaller states around them, trying to expand. And also Qi, who had a very good geography, and they made legal reforms in order to centralize their power. You should keep those guys in mind for later, because now there is trouble in the Zhou heartland. The new king, Huang, wasn't particularly fond of the Duke of Zheng, and that was a problem, because Zheng was one of the main protectors of the Zhou. One disrespectful meeting, a land dispute, and some stolen wheat later, and suddenly there's war. Now the Zhou wasn't able to muster up a strong force anymore, so they instead called on some other states to form a coalition and attack their common enemy together. Then they got obliterated. If there was any hope of the Zhou reclaiming its lands back, it was now crushed. So a couple of years passed, and Duke Huan of Qi was doing pretty good for himself. By 667, he was controlling a good chunk of China, either as direct vassals or through alliances. So the king of Zhou gave Huan the title of Hegemon, which meant that he and his state were the protectors of all Chinese peoples against barbarians. He acted as the military leader of China, hosted conferences between the largest powers at the time, collected tribute from smaller states, and had the honor of paying more taxes to the king than anybody else. And they accepted. Qi would fill this role by defeating the Shanrong barbarians, who were raiding the state of Yan, and also by defeating the Beidi barbarians twice, who were bullying some smaller states. In 656, he looked at the map and couldn't help but notice the big blue blob that was growing in the south. So he went to his coalition and said,
Chu is getting too strong, we must stop them. I want us to form the grandest army our people can muster. Guided by the holy minds of our forefathers, we shall ride down and bring defeat and total annihilation to the state of Chai.
Because they were a puppet of the state of Chu. And when they beat them, they also did a little field trip to the south, but were unable to inflict a total defeat to Chu. Eventually, they signed a treaty that prohibited Chu from ever again trying to expand north. So they said fuck it, and just expanded east. This was bad news for Huan, since not only had he not made a dent into Chu, but his own strength was beginning to run out, since powerful families were beginning to form factions in the Qi heartland. On top of that, other members of the coalition were getting absolutely ran through by barbarians, since Qi was too weak to put a single one of them down, and worst of all, Chu was heading straight towards one of Qi's allies, the state of Shu. With no other options, Huan called a meeting between the coalition members and presented them with the plan. They did that, but as it turned out, Chu didn't really care about its ally and kept focusing on Shu. Eventually, two states in the Qi coalition went to war with each other, leading to the total collapse of the coalition and showing just how much Qi's strength had lessened. leaving Shu to fend for itself. They met the Chu army at Luolian, and although they were defeated, they managed to inflict enough casualties to Chu to keep their independence. In the same year, Wan Zhong, Huan's most important minister, who practically pioneered the hegemony, died, and this plunged Qi into further chaos. A few years later, Duke Huan of Qi, having grown old and ill, would die after 24 years of hegemony over China, with some sources saying he was locked by his ministers in his chambers, where he was left to starve to death. Nice. And then his sons immediately began a civil war, ending Qi's dominance over China. After some years without a hegemon, the Duke of Song thought it was his time to shine. He was a huge Shang dynasty fanboy and wanted to re-establish it, since he believed Song was the successor of Shang. So he began aggressively expanding and conquering his smaller neighbors. He also started hosting conferences and in general acting like a hegemon, even though he was nowhere near that type of power. Then he ran out of little people to attack, so he went after Chu. He managed to get a pretty good position where the Chu army was trying to cross a river, and instead of attacking and ambushing them, he let them pass because he wanted a clear and honorable victory. Then he got his ass whooped, wounded, and died a year later. And so this gave Chu the opportunity to expand north again, since there was no hegemon to stop them. Or was there? You see, the state of Jin had been in a pretty precarious position up until now. It was constantly plagued by civil wars and succession crises. Eventually, this guy found a very simple solution to the problem. He just started mentoring his entire bloodline to ensure stability. Eventually, he caused a civil war between him and his sons, leading one of them, Yu, to escape to the state of Erko, and the other, Wen, went to some Beidi tribes and later started avoiding assassination attempts by his father by jumping from state to state. Throughout his travels in exile, he gained many capable followers who would prove very useful to him later on. Eventually, his dad died and was replaced by his half-brother, who kept up with the assassination attempts until this minister had enough of it all and just murdered the entire court and installed a toddler on the throne. Then he realized it wouldn't work out because he was just a toddler and he didn't have any assistance. You know, because he murdered the entire court. So he sent an invitation to Wen, but he declined. So he sent an invitation to Yu, and he accepted. He returned and was crowned Duke of Jin, and his first act as Duke was sentencing that minister to death for killing everyone. And then he carried the family tradition by sending more assassination attempts against his brother, who was in the state of Qi at the time, until he got ill and died, leaving his son as the new Duke. However, Qin wasn't very fond of him, so they got a hold of Wen and installed him on the throne. So Wen started reforming, filling his ranks with the capable people he met whilst exiled, and he managed to create a pretty strong state. During his exile, he also helped the Zhou king in a civil war, so he was given some strategically important lands near the capital. He formed a new coalition and met the Chu army at Shangpu. The Jin commander dressed his horses up as tigers to scare the Chu horses, and that somehow worked, winning them the battle, after which the Chu commander committed suicide. For this triumph, Wen was awarded with the title of Hegemon by King Xiang of Zhou. So now Wen was free to expand south, and he wanted to start with Zheng. With him came the state of Qin, but during the war, a Zheng representative came to the Qin leader, Duke Mu, and essentially told him that he should totally betray the Jin because A, they wouldn't really gain much from helping the invasion, B, the Jin was totally gonna betray them sooner or later anyway, and C, the Zheng was going to become an ally to the Jin. And Mu was so on board with the idea that he began withdrawing his army, resulting in Wen's defeat, who died 2 years later, leaving his son Xiang to take power, and Xiang was pissed. Some years passed, during which Mu was slowly building up his power to attack Jin, and he had also started thinking that maybe he didn't really need Zheng after all, so he tried to attack it. But on the way something odd happened. They got swindled by a commoner. I do not know how else I can describe this to you. They got swindled by a commoner. Look it up, it's one of the stupidest things I have ever read in my life. They retreated, were ambushed by the Jin army and got defeated. In the end, Zheng and Jin became allies, and Duke Mu, humiliated and defeated, would return to beating up smaller tribes out west. For that, he is considered a hegemon by some. After all this trouble, Chu was back and wanting to expand north more than ever before. This time they actually succeeded, and were within a stone's throw of the royal capital. From there they went after Zheng, but Jin came to the rescue once more. Chu ended up reaching Zheng first and coerced them into an alliance. It all culminated in the Battle of Bi, in which two very cautious and inexperienced generals played a game of chicken over who would get scared first and retreat. Jin lost the battle. The king of Shu then took his generals and had their horses symbolically drink from the Yellow River. They were once beaten by Jin in a stupid way. Now they had beaten them in an even stupider way. After this, Jin would start experiencing what the Zhou experienced when it was prevalent. Its vassals and noble families would grow stronger and wealthier, and eventually 6 noble families would emerge and control Jin, whilst competing and scheming with each other to consolidate their own power even further. From this point on, the Duke of Jin would hold no real authority or power. Hey, remember the state of Wu? They were introduced way back in the Shang video, but have not done a single thing yet. Well, they were considered more barbarian than Chinese, so when they attacked the Chinese state at 584, everyone was alarmed and ready to retaliate. All except for Jin, that is. They saw an opportunity instead. They sent an ambassador to Wu, and they struck a deal where they would become allies, the Jin would teach them how to wage war, and Wu would receive funding from Jin. This was all basically done to create a proxy through which they would annoy Chu. A few years later, all the major players got together in order to discuss some peace terms, with the aim of putting an end to the endless wars and power struggles and achieving peace. Of course, the peace didn't last longer than 50 years. This happened because the main reason to promote a peace in the first place was the idea of hegemony, which itself promoted the idea of a united China against barbarians. However, due to the assimilation of Wu, and also the tribes that Qin and Jin had conquered in the west, the line between barbarian and Chinese had become very blurry by now, and so the idea of hegemony had also become quite useless, having lost its main purpose. During this shaky peace, an old man from a village in Chu named Laozi,
perhaps you've heard of him,
became a bookkeeper and a scholar. Eventually, legend has it, that he got his hands on scrolls written by the mythical Yellow Emperor. Upon receiving this divine knowledge, he became a sage of virtue and started spreading his wisdom throughout China. He taught that life and everything above and below it is governed by a certain universal order. The best way to live, according to him, was to allow this universal order to take its course instead of trying to change something as solid and as unchangeable as our own destiny. After many decades of spreading his teaching, he saw China get plunged deeper and deeper into war, and decided to leave and head west. At the border, he was stopped by a guard who asked him to write a book containing all of his teachings to leave behind for the new generations. The guard was so touched by the book and its wisdom that he abandoned his post and went with Laozi west, and where they went from there, nobody knows. Some legends claim that he traveled as far as India, where he was the teacher to a certain Siddhartha Gautama, more commonly known as the Buddha.
Oh my god, not this again. Laozi wasn't even a real person, he was totally mythical. It clearly says it on Wikipedia. I can't believe you would lie to your viewer like that. This is insanity. I am literally shaking and crying. This is not even historically accurate. I am going to upload this to our bad history again. You filthy CCP spy, your propaganda will not pass. Your plot will not follow through. I'll make sure it fails, you filthy liar.